He's been called the greatest running coach of all time. And while greatest is subjective, he's certainly one of the most influential. He personally coached Olympians from his native New Zealand to multiple Olympic medals in the 1960s, but it was his revolutionary thinking and training methods that arguably started the worldwide running boom of the 1970s. The phenomenon of everyday people running for fun began with him, and half a century later is stronger than ever. Today is July 6, 2025, and on this day in 1917, legendary running coach Arthur Lydiard was born in Auckland, New Zealand. I'm your host, Running Up That Hillary, and you are listening to Today in Running History. So, guys, 4 of the first 5 episodes of this podcast included pretty extensive interviews and ended up being a lot longer than I originally intended. And some feedback that I've gotten from a few listeners is that I'm going a little too in depth on these stories. I want to thank all y'all for listening and giving me this feedback. This is my first time doing anything like this at all, so it's a complete learning experience. I'll be fine-tuning things as we go, and please keep the constructive comments and messages coming, because as much as this is a passion project for me, it's also something that I want y'all to enjoy. So I'm going to do my best to keep things super high level in this episode, and then we'll go from there. All right, let's talk about Arthur Lydiard. So he was born on July 6th, 1917 in Auckland, New Zealand, to a blue-collar family. He was a teenager in the Great Depression, fun time, and he had to drop out of school and go work at a shoe factory to help support his family. He was always pretty active. He played rugby as a child. He would bike to work at that shoe factory. And then he also joined the Lyndale Athletics Club, so he would have something fun to do aside from just making shoes. And it was at that club that Arthur met a guy named Jack Dolan. And the two decided to go for a 5-mile run. And that run was a disaster. And here's what Arthur later said about it. This is a quote. "My pulse rose. I gasped for air. My lungs and throat felt like I had been scorched. My legs felt like rubber. My whole body felt the effects of the run and the effort expended to get me to the end of it." So basically, he felt the way that any of us do when we're getting into running for the first time or getting back into it after some time off. And it really sucks. It sucks. And Arthur Lydiard decided he never wanted to feel like that again. So he started running a lot, like a lot. He went from just about dying on that 5-mile run with a friend to regularly running up to 250 miles per week. And for perspective, that's about double what today's professional marathoners run. So if 250 weekly miles sounds insane, that's because it is. Arthur Lydiard went on to have a decently successful running career of his own. He won the New Zealand National Marathon title twice, and he ran a lifetime best of 2:37:55. So not running on the Olympics, not breaking world records, but definitely a decent runner on his own. But Lydiard's true success and legacy came in the form of coaching. In the 1950s, he left the Lyndale Athletics Club and started a running group. A young runner named Murray Halberg followed Lydiard over to the new club and started following his training philosophy. Over the next couple of years, more and more runners joined that group. These runners were known as Arthur's Boys and began having a ton of success. Murray Halberg, who I mentioned a minute ago, went on to become the first New Zealander to break 4 minutes in the mile. And this was just a few years after Roger Bannister became the first man ever to break 4 minutes in the mile. He then went on to win Olympic gold in the 5,000 meters in 1960. Another of Arthur's boys, Barry McGee, won the bronze medal in the marathon at that same 1960 Olympics. And then there was Peter Snell, who is often called the greatest New Zealand runner of all time. With Lydiard's coaching, Snell won Olympic gold in the 800 meters in 1960. And then he went on to break the world 800-meter, half mile, and mile records all within 1 week in 1962. And then he came back to the Olympics in 1964 to win double Olympic gold in the 800 meters and the 1500 meters. Arthur Lydiard's training philosophy is usually called periodization, which basically means he broke things up into a few distinct phases. The first phase is base building. So by now, Lydiard had honed in his extremely high mileage to a more reasonable yet still high mileage of about 100 miles per week, which is a lot closer to what the professional marathoners of today will run. He became the OG proponent of long, slow runs used to build endurance. There was this 22-mile loop that started and ended in front of his house, and so Lydiard would have his runners train on that at least weekly. Then there was the hill work phase, the tempo phase, the speed phase, and finally the taper phase, leaving his runners ready to peak at the exact moment of their target race. And I know what you're thinking. That just sounds like common sense training for distance running. And these days it is. But 70 years ago, these distinct phases, especially the long, slow distance one, were completely revolutionary. If you are training for a marathon, it's likely that your coach or the plan you downloaded or the program your running group follows or whatever it is you're using is influenced in some way by Lydiard's training methods. And actually, if you're training to run a marathon at all and you are not an elite runner, you have Lydiard's influence to thank for that as well. In 1961, he and his boys started the Auckland Joggers Club, which encouraged all types of people to come out and run a few miles for fun and health and leisure. And a few episodes back, I talked about Coach Bill Bowerman and the trip he took to visit Arthur Lydiard in 1962. Bowerman famously joined one of those leisurely jogs, just about died, and then spent the rest of his 6-week visit to New Zealand jogging daily and incrementally building up his endurance. And he was so enthralled by this phenomenon of everyday people just going for runs that he returned to the US a complete jogging evangelist. He ended up publishing his book, which was just called Jogging, in 1967, and that book sold 1 million copies. It was also one of the major catalysts of the running boom of the 1970s, and none of that would have happened without the influence of Arthur Lydiard. So this weekend, as you're looking over your training plan, going for a nice, long, slow run, or even just browsing some local road race websites online, you have Arthur Lydiard to thank. That is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to like, follow, subscribe, comment, share, all that jazz, and then tune in tomorrow as we head to the turn of the 21st century and the single fastest mile ever run. I'm your host, Running Up That Hillary, and this has been Today in Running History. Arthur Lydiard's training philosophy is usually called periodization. God damn it, I can't say words. Periodization. Oh my God. You can throw this in some bloopers if you want, because this periodization. This is the only language I even speak, and I can't do it right.